Hello and welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Ben Martinek, your host on Catholic Money Mastermind. And today I'm joined with another new member of the Catholic Financial Planners Network. Be sure to check it out, everyone. We're growing by leaps and bounds. It seems like every month we're bringing a few more members on, which is just great, exciting news. And what's super fun for me as we bring on new members is I get a chance to meet them all one-on-one through the podcast. And we have one of our latest additions, Lance Peters with Nautical Star Financial out of Dallas, Texas area. Lance, why don't you say hi and introduce yourself to our audience?
Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it. Lance Peters, Nautical Star Financial, started about 3 years ago to serve clients in their truest needs.
Yeah, so Lance, as we were chatting on this, an item that we're going to be focusing in on today's call, and it's one that we haven't delved into, and I think it's going to be of relevance for our audience. And that's really, what does it mean to be a Catholic advisor or a Christian advisor? And maybe put more broadly, like what's the impact that the gospel or being a believer or a follower of Jesus has in how you might advise, financially speaking, to your clients. So we're going to spend a lot of time, speaking about that difference for maybe versus someone else who may not be a believer, has no faith, or only is driven by, worldly, determining factors. But it seems like that's a mission. The reason why we're bringing this up is it's a mission in your own practice and your own focus and audience. And I do want to share a little bit about, Nautical Star Financial and why you named the business as such and how this is just a center motif in your own life.
You bet. Yeah, I think, Ben, that people don't really think through much as far as their financial advisor, if they have one. The perspective of that financial advisor, and it has profound impact as far as the kind of guidance and direction that financial advisor is bringing to the table. And let's just break it down as far as really big stuff, and that's secular side versus a non-secular or a Christian-based perspective. So if you have a secular advisor that's out there, they're going to have a very different perspective versus a Christian type of a financial advisor that has training in Christian-based financial planning. So, for instance, the secular advisor, their whole focus is based on what the world teaches them, and that is happiness is found through money, frankly, and that they're all there about who can die with the very most that's out there. So in other words, they're trying to maximize somebody's wealth that's out there, and that's what their whole focus is on. And then if we can try to figure out how to protect the wealth too, that's usually more along the lines of the client or the investor. Hey, I've amassed all this. I also want to protect it to make sure that nothing happens to that. Those are all from a secular mindset. What's interesting is that from a Christian perspective, we do many of the same types of activities as far as from a secular perspective, but from totally different motives and reasons why. So, as a Christian, we're called to be stewards, frankly, of all the resources that God's provided to us. So as a steward, you think of things very, very differently, and you approach things from a very different perspective as a result. So as a steward, that means that you have oversight and responsibility over something specific that's been given to you. And so if you have responsibility and oversight of something, you have that responsibility and you need to manage it as appropriate. And then at some point down the road, there's going to be some type of accountability as far as how did you manage those resources that were given to you.
Yeah, responsibility and accountability really go hand in hand. I mean, if you just look at the root origin of responsibility, it's this notion of giving a response.
Mm-hmm.
So it's and accountability is giving an account, right? So I mean,
exactly.
It's you needing to now give governance or to speak, to have oversight might be another way to describe all this, of what is that I've done. And, within a Christian, belief, I mean, we believe Jesus is the king of the universe and that eventually he will come again in the second coming, the parousia, as it's called. And he's in that coming, there will be a judgment. This is really a central theme within the catechism of the church. And really all the actions of all those who have lived will be judged. It can be a little harsh. It's not a common way in which we typically understand and think of our day to day, to be honest with you. And most of modern society centers in on autonomy and self-determination and actions of, as long as something passes my own judgment or my own approval, that makes it sufficient and as objective or as authoritative as it needs to go, as long as I approve of it. It's not quite fully within the scope or the belief of Christianity, which says actually, my life's actions have a purpose that aren't entirely my own, and moreover, those actions have a judgment to be had by really the other, the final authority. And so for anyone who's a practicing believer, what I choose to do with your money, what you choose to do with someone's money, what they choose to do with their money, like guidance we're giving, someone's going to review my homework. Maybe to put this in another way, right? I don't get away from it. Whatever I put down on paper, I better be comfortable with, because it is going to get looked over. Do you feel like that changes things a lot? Just knowing, like, look, hey, like this isn't going unseen or unnoticed.
Well, yeah, you want to use whatever tools you can to help you be that steward. So sometimes that mindset I find has helped me very well, as far as, hey, I want to have an accounting at some point. I need to make sure that I can respond appropriately in my responsibilities, and making sure that they're appropriate for everything that I'm doing. So absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully, as God is just, we also believe him to be merciful. Yeah. I don't want to be presumptuous of that mercy, but it's a good thing that he is too, because I don't think any of us, as we know, measure up fully to who we ought to be. But it doesn't, we don't need to go into a theology lecture, and not one that I'm well prepared to speak on. But, this mixture of God's justice and mercy is not one that's fully known to us as to how that will play out. And they say, to live life as, pray as if everything depends on God, but live life as if everything depends on you. And I feel like that kind of hits the balance correctly between God's mercy and justice, is, realize minimally that what we do is, subject for that final judgment, as we've been speaking at. Well, an item that we brought up ahead of the show, Lance, you've got a varied background. You've worked in a lot of different firms, different fields specific to financial services. You're one of our veteran advisors with 30 years in the business. You've also got a focus on working with small business owners and helping them to refine and understand their responsibilities, not only to themselves and their families, but maybe to the broader social order. I'm kind of curious, it's just part of your prior work experience, and just opposing this notion of a believer, an advisor who functions under faith or in belief, versus an advisor who's maybe driven more by greed. What are just some instances that have come up in your mind of where you think the advice that was delivered or would be delivered, varied, because of someone not ultimately sharing our faith?
You bet. Great question. In part, it's really hard to work as a financial advisor from a Christian perspective when you're in a type of environment that encourages just doing what's in the best interest of your pocketbook or the company's pocketbook, and not in the client's best interest. I'll give you some examples. When I first started off in the industry, I worked for a large financial planning firm that based its financial plans around life insurance and selling mutual fund products to the clients as the solutions for the financial plan. And it was always motivated, always meaning just the motivation as far as to bring new clients on was how much money can you make from this particular client. And so from a client's perspective, or from an investor's perspective, when they're thinking of financial advisors, they typically aren't thinking, hey, what's the mindset of this advisor? And so if the advisor is talking to you saying about, hey, how much money can we make for you and create for you, that's giving you clues as far as maybe there's something not quite right here. So listen to the language the advisor is using with you. And if it's all about how much money can be made here, it's probably not the right environment. So I found that to be the case with insurance. And keep in mind, this isn't all insurance agents by any means, but insurance people that are selling things for commission is
Yeah.
first and foremost. So it doesn't mean all commission salespeople are bad. That's not the case. And that's not what I'm trying to say. But this is the type of grounds that breed um, uh, bad apples that are out there and that are just trying to see how much money that they can make from each transaction and each person that they're dealing with. I also see it in the wirehouses like the Merrill Lynch's, the Smith Barneys, which is where the stockbroker community was born out of. Lots and lots of greed in that particular one, and that's because there's a lot of commission-driven products that are sold through there. People that, just generally speaking, as far as insurance as a whole, whether it's life insurance, annuity products, can have those types of temptations as far as to sell something because it's going to generate a big commission for them if they can sell that particular product.
Right.
So,
I mean, it's so many financial services, they come in a form of a product, maybe an insurance product or an investment product. That would be the most common way to think of this. And, in either one of those situations, we have, people are persuaded through either fear or greed pretty strongly. And you could say persuaded, could easily just as well say manipulated through one of those, either this is what will happen to you if you don't move forward with this product, and so, that could be on the insurance, could be on the investment side, more so like FOMO, fear of missing out. But it tends to be like this would be a harm that you're still exposing yourself to if you don't proceed, which could be rationally based and easily understandable. But I think to sell someone simply on fear alone is still probably not fully being as direct or influential as needed. Like we should be able to explain ourselves rationally and have that be the basis of the decision, not the emotion. But then, so you have fear, but then you also have greed, which is just as prominent within our circles. And this isn't so much about fear. Could be on this FOMO again, fear of missing out in terms of this investment. But it's more like, oh, you're going to make a lot of money. If you move forward with this, you're going to be richer, beyond your wildest dreams, and you're going to regret the day, if you don't move forward with this. This is such a great opportunity for such a good use of your money. It's going to make everything. So your golden ticket. And, people are greedy. And so they're like, wow, I'd love to get my hands in on something that's going to do that great. I don't want to miss out on it either. And so I'm kind of curious, like that's how I've always seen and interpreted and thought of this. Is that what you would see firsthand in some of these arrangements as part of their approach to, closing business?
it is. You're exactly correct. So appealing to making lots of money or lots of money without a lot of risk and easy money. It's easy to fall into that trap because we all would love easy stuff. And there are some things that are easy, but again, you're listening for as far as what's the language that this advisor is talking to me in. Is it more from a Christian perspective or is it more from a worldly perspective? And if it's from a worldly perspective, they're in the business then to maximize their own wallet, just as they're talking to you as far as how can you make as much money as possible. They're thinking the same thing, and you're their ticket.
Right.
So you want to find, I think, an advisor that has that Christian mentality specifically, because what you're looking for is you want a holy advisor, frankly, as far as it can help guide you and help you as far as make decisions as a steward. What's the most important thing? And that's, developing that relationship with God on a daily basis. And so if your financial advisor is asking you and your spouse to go to prayer and talk with God and ask him, what do you have us to do with these resources that you have us? and then come back and share that with your financial advisor so the financial advisor can then incorporate that into the plan, you get totally different results, totally different results. And then you have a financial advisor that's walking with you in your faith and helping you grow holier and making sure that you're using those resources that God has provided as being the steward that he's calling you to be.
Yeah, Lance, that's a very provocative idea. And it's something that I have utilized at times with clients, but I must say I'm not consistent in it. And you're really kind of calling me out of like, why, let's bring, especially of my clients who are fellow believers, Christians, Catholics, Protestants, why not bring this to a point of prayer? Why not offer this up and seek the guidance of the Holy Spirit as to what is it that we should be doing, and not have that as part of the conversation, or that part of my advice to you is, why don't you go pray on this and then come back to me as a couple and let me know what you're thinking, so and I can help kind of maybe discern that prayer, but also give you direction based on your responses. And that then our angle here isn't, under the secular mindset, as you've been alluding to, of maximizing our wealth or protecting our wealth or keeping all of it as if it all belongs to us. It's more of like, hey, this belongs to God, our Father. And we have it in one document, but I'm familiar with, the church refers to it as a social mortgage. Like, we have this, it's been lent to us, but it doesn't really ever belong to us. We do have to give it back. And when we give it back, there's then that accounting that, we have to tell of, what did we do with our talents? Very specifically going back to that gospel scriptural passage of the talents. What did you do with the resources that I gave you? So how does this work for you, Lance, as you've opened clients up to prayer in the meeting? Is this well received? Do your clients, love the idea that this happens? Or are they like, who am I working with? What kind of response do you get?
Well, it really depends upon who the client is. So if I have a client that's not a Christian at all in the slightest, this is not going to be meaningful to them at all. And so I don't go down that road with
Sure.
them. But as a financial advisor, my job is to get to know and understand the individuals, who they are and what motivates them. And so if I discover that, hey, they're devout Christians, they really want to grow in their faith, I dig deeper into that and understand as far as what's important about that to you. What are you hoping to achieve? And so I can help drive the conversation to be much more meaningful for them, to really help them grow as a couple and develop their relationship better with God and the direction as far as how to be that steward God's calling them to be.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, that makes just so much more sense, Lance, than working with someone who's just out. Nothing against someone who make a living on commission sales. We know of Catholic advisors who do make their living that way, and so this isn't meant
exactly correct
to diminish them. But there is a conflict of interest. I think that's an objective fact, that if someone is making their living is directly through whether or not you buy or purchase and move forward with this product, minimally, even with someone who does work in that way, they need to be disclosing what the kickback is, what the commission is, what they are seeking to receive, so that you can, at least as the client, understand and be aware of the influence, given to them, especially if they were giving you a suite of different products and you're trying to choose from them. You should know, which, that payback to the advisor may not be equal. In fact, it probably isn't across those different arrangements. The advisor should disclose to you how they're being maybe influenced in their recommendations, and be able to speak to it. And I think at the end, Lance, I'd like to kick back over to you, but like this just notion that, like, look, it's important for your advisor to give an accounting of their actions, and hopefully with one that has a Christian faith and the belief that, look, all of my actions, regardless I want them or not, are going to be subject to an accounting. Like, that would change what you do, because we struggle with, like, I don't know, could I get away with this? Maybe I could do something and my client wouldn't realize it, and I just take a little bit, right? Maybe it's not that big of a deal. Well, even if that little bit that you're taking is being reviewed, does that change what you choose to do?
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think, Lance?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. When I look at the industry as a whole, I the industry is essentially, as you know, Ben, divided up into sort of two different camps. The two different camps being specifically those being regulated by one body of government called FINRA. And those are all the broker dealer firms that are out there. And those are the firms that have commissionable products that are available to those advisors. The other camp that's out there that in the financial services industry is regulated by totally different standards. So instead of a sales standard, it's a fiduciary standard. So these would be the registered investment advisory firms that are out there that have to take their clients as far as best interest at heart for everything that they do and have an accounting. And so when I started off in the industry, I started off over on the one side, the broker dealer side, in being regulated by FINRA with commissionable sales available to me. And I saw just all the problems that were in that side. And I, over years, have migrated over to the other side because I found and saw that it was just so much more appropriate. And frankly, it's in line with our faith. So as a faith, we're called to help and be stewards of what we have and just to do the right thing for people at all times. And the registered investment advisory side, where we have a totally different standard of care than what's the FINRA side has, just really aligns perfectly with Christian values. So I think that's probably where I would actually start the first as an investor. I'd ask, hey, what regulatory body governs you? Is it FINRA or is it the SEC or maybe your state? So once you understand that, you can then have a much better perspective as far as, okay, does my advisor have potentially a commission hat? And so which hat are they going to be wearing when I'm talking with them? And just if you have an advisor that's on that side, that's fine, but you just understand as far as how to negotiate and navigate that particular area to make sure that your interests are always at best at heart, because in that case, it's buyer beware, and the investor really needs to pay attention, I think, more so than anything else. And if they're on the other side, and it's a registered investment advisory firm, they know that advisor has their interest at heart at all times. So that can help give some peace of mind, I know, for a lot of people that are out there.
Right. Yeah. It's just funny, as you were sharing all that, these notions and themes of greed were running through my head and my mind. And, at the end of the day, like, there is really no full safe protection against someone who's greedy. I mean, people can lie. Yep. We have folks who are sheep, wolves in sheep's clothing, right, as the scriptures allude to. So someone can say all the nice things and give you on a good, a good face and just be lying through their teeth. At the end of the day, like that's possible. And you could fall for it. I could fall for it. Any of us could fall for it. And it's just a fundamental risk that we have if we go and choose to trust somebody. But, what you were, alluding to earlier, Lance, of like, I don't know, is your advisor praying with you? Man, it seems pretty hard when somebody is praying with you at the same time as just lying through their teeth. Like, golly, you'd have to be really good. I think that
would be a really bad advisor.
Right.
You'd be like, oh man, that's really bad. But could they be there? And have they in the past? Absolutely. I'm sure there has been. I'm not familiar with any. But I think there's telltale signs, though, and you just have to listen. So keep those spidey senses up, and your gut will help really direct you. And that's super important, is having that gut check. And if you say, I totally understand this person and trust them, that's really important. And you want to go down that road, regardless of where that advisor happens to be. But if they happen to be on one side or another, it gives you just different questions that I would be asking and different things to be looking out for as you're going along.
Right. I mean, I suppose we're partial towards being the registered investment advisors being regulated by either the SEC or, our state regulators. And I think there's good reason for that. And I do think probably on the whole, you'll tend to find better advice. But the truth is it's a mixed bag, regardless of where you go. There's always a risk of who you're working with is not going to be, isn't going to treat you the right way. Bernie Madoff came away with his millions, lying to people boldly, and people believe him. And again, I think that notion of greed was probably very persuasive in getting folks to buy in and into the scheme. If anybody, greed's a big persuader. If anybody can to convince you to make a lot more money this way, it doesn't take a lot of persuasion, actually. It's the sad truth of it. For people to be all about it, they're more than happy. P.T. Barnum has this great quote that, I think he lived by this, but it's still good for our own historical record that, there's a sucker born every minute, and folks can be really gullible when it comes to greedy matters, and they're just, like putty in the hand. They're more than happy to buy into whatever scheme you're gonna sell them because of that greed. But I am kind of curious. This is the philosophy, me and Lance. Perhaps you'll just have to permit this out of me, but let's just set, like, why do you think greed is wrong or bad? Just setting aside even just the moral norm or the prohibition against it within the Ten Commandments, and there's different ways in which that would be expressed. But don't be greedy. It's not explicitly a commandment, or at least I don't believe it is. I'm blanking on it. It would have been. It wouldn't. Don't steal or don't lie. It's kind of a combination of the two, but there isn't one specifically against greed. I don't know. Why do you think greed is problematic, and how it would be fundamentally wrong, or an issue that if you have an advisor who's driven by greed, how that could change the relationship? Do you have a sense on that? What do you see as being wrong with greed?
Yeah, great question. Frankly, it's all about being self-centered. It just is self-serving, and that's not what we're called to do. We're called as Christians to serve one another. And so it would be the opposite of greed, and that's giving away. And frankly, as we give of ourselves, that's where we find our fulfillment. And when we look to Jesus and the saints, we see that they always gave way more than what they asked in return. And so those are our models that we want to emulate. And so greed would be the polar opposite of self-giving.
Right. I mean, you have Jesus's life being poured out in a self-sacrificing way. And, at the Last Supper, he says, do this in imitation of me, as I have served you, serve others effectively. And, his whole model of ministry, is what ministry is to serve. I didn't come to be served, but to serve. So
exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Greed would be really the polar opposite, of that of, what can you do for me? How can you better my interest? How can you further that along? And I'm really only interested in you to the extent that you're doing that. I will say, just as a side quip, I said there isn't a commandment on greed per se. I suppose the 9th and 10th commandments kind of get at that with, don't covet your neighbor's wife or your neighbor's belongings. So there you go. It's coming back to me. It hasn't all been lost. But what else did you have to say there? I think you had another comment that was top of mind.
Oh, I was just going to say, that's the reason I got into this business 32 years ago, was to be of service, because I found, as far as what God made me to was to be of service. And I discovered that when I was in the Navy. I joined the Navy to be of service to my country. And that's at the end of my service in the Navy, God revealed, Lance, I made you to be of service. And that's what you're all about, is to give of yourself. And so when I got out of the Navy, I went into being a financial planner so I could give of myself and give of my knowledge to help people to be able to better themselves. And then I've been refining just my understanding of what it is to give and to serve over the last 32 years, and just to help individuals as they continue growing in Christ.
Right. So, I mean, let's take a moment there, Lance, and just talk a little bit more about your business. I should, before we do that, though, I mean, hopefully a lot of this conversation for everyone who's been listening has been provocative. And, if you are looking for a good advisor who's committed to, Catholic Church teaching and is willing to make a public profession of faith, All the advisors that we have on our network have done that within the Catholic Financial Planners Network. So go to catholicplanners.com, or excuse me, catholicfinancialplanners.com, to learn more, maybe pick an advisor out who could be of a good fit for your situation. Everyone in the network is all about, hopefully, we're hoping, we're embodying, everyone is about serving and being of service and not, not seeking their own bottom line. But your business is called Nautical Star. And Lance, I don't think I knew that your background was in the Navy. And so now it's starting to really pull home to me, like, oh, well, that's why your business is called Nautical Star. You might maybe just share a little bit more and talking about, your service offerings and just why the business is Nautical Star.
You bet. So I do have my roots being in the Navy, and as a sailor, sailors use the stars to chart, to go from one place to another place. And this life is a journey for us, and we're going from one place to another place. And that place, that ultimate journey, hopefully, is heaven. So, as a sailor and then as a financial advisor, I view myself as far as just being able to help people get from place A to place B. And so helping them understand that. And so, using, stars are when it's dark out, we don't have any way usually to navigate, but there's the stars that are up there to help us navigate. And just like with our Catholic faith, we have so many stars to help guide us. We call them saints. And specifically, Stella Mara, Star of the Sea, our Mother of Mary, is my star and guide to help making sure that that I can do God's will and be with God at some day, see Him face to face. So that's the reason that the name Nautical Star is just helping guide people from where they currently are to where their ultimate destination they want to get to.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love the name of the firm. It's perfect. I always like when a Catholically named firm is a little disguised, like there's the breadcrumbs there, but then it all pulls home and you're like, oh, okay, that's the reason for the name. So great firm. So Lance, I think, as we just continue to think and pull on, a prayer that I had pulled up ahead of the call as we were chatting that I feel like is appropriate, because a lot of what we are disguising here or discussing is not just, how do we maximize returns? That's great. Yeah, let's do that. I'm all about trying to get our clients good returns.
Yeah.
That's our business. And we want to make the best use of your money by all means.
We're stewards.
Right. Yeah. We have an accounting to give both to our clients and to the Lord. But, there are maybe to that theme of the Nautical Star, we are working through the darkness, and it's not always clear what it is that we're supposed to do or what's forthcoming. And, we are living in faith. And, there's this beautiful prayer that I'm going to read out loud. And I just love to get your thoughts, or if there's anything that stands out to you. Hopefully folks have heard this. If you haven't, it's just a wonderful prayer. I've known it for a few years, and it's just, it's great. It comes from St. John Henry Cardinal Newman. And I'll go ahead and share into it. It's called The Mission of My Life. And this has been one of the most compelling prayers I think I've ever come across. And I hope it impacts you as much as it's impacted me. So the prayer goes as, God has created me to do Him some definite service. He has committed some work to me which He has not committed to another. I have my mission. I may never know it in this life, but I shall be told it in the next. I am a link in the chain, a bond of connection between persons. He has not created me for naught. I shall do good. I shall do His work. I shall be an angel of peace, a preacher of truth in my own place, while not intending it if I do but keep His commandments. Therefore, I will trust Him. Whatever I am, I can never be thrown away. If I am in sickness, my sickness may serve Him. In perplexity, my perplexity may serve Him. If I am in sorrow, my sorrow may serve Him. He does nothing in vain. He knows what He is about. He may take away my friends. He may throw me among strangers. He may make me feel desolate, make my spirit sink, hide my future from me. Still, He knows what He is about. I've just kind of thought, I've always loved that prayer, Lance. What are some immediate thoughts to you in this regard of, some of the relevance of that prayer in the conversation we're having here today?
Yeah, it's such a beautiful prayer. And I love especially the first few sentences there where it says He has committed some work to me which he has not committed to another. It just speaks to me because oftentimes I know we can get caught up in just saying, okay, well, if I don't do it, somebody else will do it. So in other words, if I don't feed this homeless, somebody else will. Well, maybe that's what God specifically put that homeless person in front of me right then to feed that homeless. You don't know. So you have to just ask God and be in constant communion with him to understand what his will is. And sometimes we don't know his will. I love some of our favorite saints out there. Usually we think of saints as, oh, they are like in perfect communion with God, and they just have this dialogue going back and forth. And that's not always the case. I think it's Saint Francis. He heard God saying, "Build my church," and so he erected a church. But actually, that Saint Francis came to learn later on that that's not actually what he was asking. He was saying, bring my children to me and baptize them and bring them into the church and build my church that way with more members in the church, not a physical building per se. So that's why, St. Francis and all the other saints, they constantly have a regular dialogue with God to understand his will. And so as Christians, that's what we're called to do, is have that constant dialogue to understand what are we to do with these resources that he's provided. How can we be the best steward possible? And I think it's great in the Bible we've taught and shown as far as that the stewards in the parable of the talents is a great example where most of them doubled whatever resources that they were given, doubled them in value. So I think that that's a clear indication that it's appropriate to invest funds as appropriate and to try to grow those for the master and whatever he has in mind for those at some future point. So that's why I love that this prayer here. He has committed some work to me which he has not committed to another. We don't know what that is. And you may not know in this life, but maybe in the next. So just that we're a link in the chain, a bond of connection between persons, and he has not created me for naught. That's just so beautiful. And so to, ask God, well, if I'm not created for nothing here in this life, well, tell me, God, what do you want me to do? And what's my purpose in this life while I'm living? And so to have that as your pursuit throughout your entire life is so beautiful. And there's just so many more things, but it goes through almost word by word and come out, or many things at least in each sentence, as far as gems that are in this beautiful prayer, the mission of my life.
Yeah, he knows what he is about. And I think maybe just as we start to wrap up the call, Lance, what really is coming to my mind, because, ahead of the call, we were talking about some of the differences between maybe working with someone who would be driven by non-Christian belief versus someone who is. And, naturally enough, if our focus is in a secular capacity, our focus or our work is to maximize your wealth and to protect it and to get the most of it for you. And I don't want to say that's not our work either as Christian advisors, but this prayer kind of sits and puts that on easy. Like he knows what he is about. And actually maybe the right thing for what you should do with your wealth isn't to maximize it or isn't to protect it. It's, it may be unknown to you, or perhaps it's even the right thing to do is to give it away. St. Catherine Ann Drexel is a beautiful witness to that. And Tyler Hackenberg with Drexel Day Financial, who's committed his financial planning firm all about Catherine Drexel. Look to that episode if you want to learn more. But it very well actually could be the opposite. Is the full mystery and the perplexity, I think, of Christianity and this response to Christ is, our overall theme usually as advisors is to grow and protect your wealth. But if we're being true or honest, that may not be the right response for all our clients or even for ourselves. And part of getting to the heart of the matter, especially hearkening back to this prayer of trusting in the mission of my life and God's plan for me, and trusting that he's got a work for me that I may not even know right now, but it is a work and it's real and it's meaningful. And at the very minimally, it'll be disclosed to me in the future. Like that really actually is the work of us as advisors, is to help you find and see the mission that God has for you And that mission may be very much not increasing or growing your net worth. Now, hopefully it's some way to pay for services, because I don't know how else we're gonna make a living. But still, like, look, the mission may not be so monetarily focused or based, and it may not be
Right.
so numbers driven. It may be actually rather quite different. But that, I don't know, as we've been chatting, we're trying to, what's the difference between a secular advisor versus a Catholic financial advisor? I think
Well,
it centers in on this mission, helping to identify the mission that God's given you.
you're absolutely correct, and that's the key right there. But keep in mind also, Ben, um, Catherine Drexel's parents were holy also, and so they were
Right.
called, and God knew, hey, they're going to amass this large amount of money, and that's going to be then specifically designed for my servant Catherine, who will then distribute it out to various charities that are out there. So
Hmm.
we don't know what we're necessarily called to. So sometimes we have some great abilities where God has given us the ability to amass large amounts of wealth. And that's fine too. But you just have to keep in mind as far as what's God calling you to do with this wealth. And so just again, all of us are specifically called to be saints, period, regardless of what resources God has provided to us. So if we can keep in mind that that's our goal, is to become saints, not to become wealthy. If we happen to be blessed with some additional resources, just as the steward in the parable in the New Testament there, one of them was given a whole lot of money to be a steward over. And so, but he was also capable of being a great steward and not letting that go to his head, being that steward over great wealth. So,
Well, and that starts to be such the difference, right, between, I think, the Christian, Judeo-Christian perspective on the world versus the secular one, where, where
yes,
greed, as you were making mention earlier, is so focused on being self-centered and self-interested and what can I do for myself. Whereas, we have the mandates to be mindful of the widow and the orphan and the poor and those who
right.
have less than we and are without. And it's not just a responsibility of tending to my own matters or even tending to my next of kin and those that are close to me that have need. It's tending to others into which I'm not even connected with. And if we take the Gospels, and Jesus' Sermon on the Mount to love our enemies, even, to go that far is to care and have a desire for their well-being. And so, yeah, I think, part of our theme today is like, is there a difference between a Catholic, Christian, Protestant advisor versus, one who isn't of those? Golly, you've got to think, well, there's got to be a difference, because if there isn't, then Christianity or the call of Christ is meaningless. It's not doing anything for us. Following him hasn't changed us one bit. And Jesus, as we know, calls us, to get out of our boat and to follow him and to making us fisher of men. So, Lance, I'm so happy that we had a chance to chat about this and have this be a centerpiece in our conversation. Well, if anyone's looking to follow up and meet you and learn a little more or find out about some of your service offerings, you made mention that you'd like to work with business owners. What's the best way for someone to connect with you, Lance?
You bet. My website's probably the easiest way and best way to connect with me, and it's really simple. It's my firm's name. It's Nautical Star Financial.com. And there's contact information all over the website on how to get a hold of me.
Well, thanks, Lance. Thanks for being a member of the network. Thanks for joining us as we have this young movement of trying to pull Catholic advisors together to serve Catholic clients. We're super excited to have you here. Folks, do check out Lance when you get a chance on his website and reach out to him if he's a good fit for you. And thanks for tuning in and listen to us. Be sure to check out CatholicFinancialPlanners.com as well as listening to the podcast. We really are seeking to serve you, as we kind of hit upon there. And, Jesus came to serve, not to be served. And we're hoping that we can live up to that as well. So thanks for tuning in, and God's blessings to you in the meantime.